Well, they can try.
I mean, we've all heard the,
Try.
Agenda 2030 and all that stuff. And one of my buddies sent me an article today, I think it was from the CDC, that says that here in the States, now if you've gotten a vaccine, that you can forget about social distancing, you can forget about wearing a mask as long as you're around other people who have been vaccinated. So they're starting to make this wedge a little bit, more defined, right? And making it more expensive for people who don't want to get a vaccine. So, we kind of talk about make it profitable, make it expensive. They're making it more expensive, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. They're talking about vaccine passports here too. Yeah.
I think that's going to be a reality. And, I don't know if you said it jokingly about, hopefully this is all gone in September, but I mean, I don't think so. Right. It's been going on so long. And I think the only way that within parts of society it'll go away is exactly the stuff that you're doing, Erica, which is in those communities, you make it super expensive in a legal way for the policeman, the mayor, the school superintendent, whoever's involved. Make it personally expensive for them. So that way in your community, it goes away. I don't think it goes away as a whole unless more and more of this starts to happen, that people push back on it. Because otherwise, why are they going to make it go away?
Yeah. Well, they're getting so much pressure not to make it go away. Like I work for Canada Post, and like my union is into this shit. Like I tried to take this right to my top union reps, and they were like, "Well, no, like you're the only person who doesn't want to do it." And I say things to them like you're responsible for making sure my foot doesn't get crushed on the dock, but you can't be responsible for whether or not I get sick. Like there's just, that doesn't make any sense at all. And how can there be no standards with the mask? Like I couldn't go home and make my own safety boot, but I can go home and make my own mask. And like there's no standards with disposing of them. There's no standards at all. It's really, really frustrating. And same with at the schools. Like they're not making sure the kids are changing the masks. They're not making sure that the mask is clean, that it fits. I mean, there's just absolutely no standards.
Yeah. And you mentioned with the union too, it's like, isn't the union's job to stand up for the minority?
Right.
So it's kind of laughable. And they're like, well, you're the only one. It's like, yeah, that's your job, to stand up when no one else will be able to stand up for me. Like, that's why we've got a union.
I have a fucking God-given right to breathe. Like if I have a God-given right, it's the right to breathe. Like you stop telling me that I have to wear a mask.
It's like the perfect psyop, because the people who know the truth can see how ridiculous it is, but the people who are going along with it, that they think they're right, it's just right there in front of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, listen, I prepared a couple things to run through. I know there's only a few of us on the line right now, but this will be recorded anyway, so other people will hear it. Why don't I hop into some of the content? And Erica, I mean, you know some of this already, but for Johnny and for Matt, and like I said, for anybody who views this after the fact, I want to at least run through some of what Stand for Thee has done, run through some of the documents, maybe even just start with some simple basics on things like jurisdiction, basics of like what an affidavit is, because I'm sure a lot of people don't even know that much. And then I think that'll take us into some conversation. And, Erica, you can also sound off here as well, because you've got good experience in the area as to how people can like leverage this stuff, whether it's, unmasking a school or it's at work or other situations too, because this framework not only applies to the mask, but to just like you said, like you've got a right. Anytime your rights are being infringed upon, like this is the framework that you go back and push back on people who are not willing to say like, oh yeah, you're right, I should probably step off that. And I mean, we're in this environment now where, this country, this whole world doesn't seem to be respecting human rights anymore, which is funny because they talk about touting human rights and respecting human rights and doing all these things in the name of human rights. and yet they're violating some of the most fundamental human rights there are. So I'm going to share a screen. We'll run through a couple things here. Let me just share my desktop and we'll go from there. Okay, bear with me here. So this is just the Stand for Thee website. I'm not going to run through this in too much depth, but for anyone that wants to go check it out, great organization, amazing resources that you can go into here under this resources tab. And, you know, this is basically, I guess, Erica, where you maybe had started or leveraged and, you know, leaned into this organization to push back on your school. So, you know, one of the things that you shared beyond just the Stand for Thee website was also this amazing Google Drive, which I put links to in this video, and I'll make sure it's linked after the fact too. And there's some really good documentation inside here, right? So whether it be, you know, different forms that we'll talk about here. So the ones I'll mention today will be, you know, this parent affidavit, the cease and desist, police letter, right? So what was written to the police, and also this medical consent form and the reasons why they're drafted in such form that they are. But there's some really good info here. There's other stuff, you know, like the COVID hoax crimes list. That one's a bit lengthy. It's like 43 pages. And I'll touch on some of that too, because I think anytime you're dealing with these situations, brevity is actually a really good strong suit, because what you want to have happen is you want, whether it's a court or a lawyer or a superintendent of a school, you want them to be able to understand what it is that you're presenting. So to me, like, I wouldn't send a 40-page document, for example, to, like, you know, my councilman or my, you know, head of my county or something like that, just because the likelihood that they read through all of it and understand it is probably zero. But beyond that, I think there's some really good info here that we can kind of dig into. So before we start there, I'll just say at the outset that when going about pushback, keep the acronym of like KISS in the back of your mind, which is just like, keep it simple, stupid, right? You don't want to overcomplicate things. The more verbose you are in your letters, the more that they can pick holes in things that you put out there. And you don't need to overcomplicate it, because really this comes down to, when you start pushing on the legal front, a jurisdiction between the real and the fictional. And fictional entities being like corporations, fictional entities being like the superintendent of a school. That's a title, that's a fiction, that's a fictional entity. Those are fictional people. Now there are real people who fill those fictional roles. So the jurisdictions are real on one hand and fictional on the other. And it's very important, because what we're going to talk about and what these affidavits really do is pull everything back into the realm of the real. Real men, real women, real rights, versus fictional entities where they can kind of say and do whatever they want with corporate policy. So that's one of the big things up front, is kind of know your jurisdiction and know how to pull them into the real, because you don't want to be operating in the realm of the fiction. That's where you lose. And then the other thing that I kind of put down here is just, you know, keep them short, keep them factual. You know, you want firsthand experience. So for an affidavit, like here, I'll read you a simple definition from Black's Law Dictionary, real quick. Just what is an affidavit, right? And it can seem like a complex legal thing, but it's actually pretty simple. So an affidavit is a voluntary declaration of facts, written down and sworn to by the declarant before an officer authorized to administer oaths. That's it. An affidavit is just something you write down on paper that says, I, Josh, swear that what I write on this piece of paper is true under the penalty of perjury in a court of law. And that's what makes it such a powerful document. So if I were to issue an affidavit to someone and make some claims inside there, I'm putting my name and my freedom to say that I swear that all of those things I said in that piece of paper is true. And then you can have an affidavit notarized by, you know, like a bank officer, right? If you want to go into the bank, but you don't even need a bank officer to notarize an affidavit. Just having like 3 witnesses over a Bible, for example, is a legal affidavit. So you don't even need to go get it notarized. Now, I get my affidavits notarized by, the banker, not a big deal. And it's kind of nice. It's got the seal on it. You get, less pushback and explanation on what that means. But there are other ways to get affidavits notarized there too. So with that said, kind of diving in here, the first thing that I want to touch on, this is the affidavit that was put together in this situation. As you can see, it's bulleted out, and that's for a reason. So you've got point 1, 2, 3. You can see they're very short, very concise statements. And you should never put together an affidavit for something that you do not want to die on that hill for, because that's essentially what you're saying is like, I believe that everything in this document is true, and I will go in front of a judge, an officer, anybody, the President of the United States, the Queen of England, anybody, and I'll say, this is exactly the way that I feel, and this is 100% true. Now, you can make claims inside of an affidavit, but I like to stick to the facts, and I think that's an important thing. Anything that's firsthand experience, anything that's factual, that's what you really want to throw into an affidavit. And the reason you do it point for point, so 5, 6, 7, all the way down, is because an affidavit, to be rebutted entirely, somebody needs to rebut your affidavit point for point. If I've got 10 points in this affidavit and you only rebut 9 of them, that 10th point is held true in a court of law. And I can use that 10th point that you never rebutted against you. So that's why it's so important to lay them out here versus just writing these big, lengthy, verbose paragraphs. There's other documents where you can do that. For example, the cease and desist letter, which I believe is document 4. Yes. This is something that Stanford Lee did and Erica did here about,
what I use.
What's that?
I hit them with the cease and desist.
Yep, exactly, right?
That's
and
what
so
I use.
this is where you can lay out your case in a little bit more of an eloquent way. You can write big paragraphs. It's not necessarily a legally binding document. And this is a good way to start communication, especially if you don't necessarily want to push somebody to the point of having to file an affidavit and get a judgment against them, because that's what you're doing. But if you want to start here, and I've started some things like this here as well, is just to write a letter and say, dear Mr. So-and-so, here's the way I see the situation. Here's the laws that I think that you're breaking. Here's how I'd like to resolve the matter, right? If they don't respond to that letter, or if they say, no, you still have to go wear masks at school or whatever it might be, that's when you would kick it up a notch to an affidavit. But you could start with an affidavit as well. But as you can see in the cease and desist, this was just a nice, well-written out letter, very easy to follow, cites public codes and sections, which I would highly recommend. And these are going to be specific to Canada, but in any realm that you're in, you can look up, the criminal codes, the state, guidelines that are being broken inside here as well. Those are all super important. The next piece, beyond the cease and desist, this was again, the letter that was written to the officer. And when you're talking to legal entities, it's always good to put in what sections and codes or things are being broken, right? Because now you're speaking on their level and you're letting them know that you're a serious person and this is not just a little matter. This is kind of speaking their language and making sure that they hear you. And this isn't just some parents saying, hey, I don't like that, my kid has to wear a mask. And then they can just be like, well, that's just, one disgruntled parent or whatnot. You start, talking about legal codes and criminal codes that they're breaking, guaranteed you're going to get their attention a little bit more. And then the last piece here, and this is an important one, is this is conditional acceptance, essentially. So this was a authorization to consent to medical treatment. But essentially it says, I will conditionally accept that you can put a mask on my child if you can do the following, right? And we won't run through the whole thing here, but essentially it gives them some outlines and says, like, A, you must make sure that the thing fits correctly. You have to make sure that there's a baseline so I can tell if my kid's heart rate is spiking, the respiratory symptoms are spiking or something of that nature. Under part D here, measure the CO2 levels. And there's some beautiful ones in here as well, like F I loved, which was saying that in accordance with mask guidelines, surgeons change their masks every 90 minutes in sterile environments. In a school, it's definitely not sterile. So instead of 90 minutes, got to change them every 15 to 30 minutes, right? So giving the other party ground and saying, hey, listen, I'll accept your conditions as long as you can make sure that they're quote unquote safe and effective, right?
Yeah.
And they're not going to be able to do all these things most likely, or they're not going to be willing to do all these things most likely. And the only one of two outcomes is going to happen. They're going to have to massively change how they implement masks in schools to fulfill all these safety measures, or they're going to have to back down on this. Otherwise, they're going to be sued for a lot of money. And I don't think they want to be sued for a lot of money. So that puts them between a rock and a hard place. But really, it's just asking for them to more or less follow the rules and respect people's rights at a very, very simple stance. They just need to be forced to do it, because right now they're not really following through on that front. So I've got some more things, and I've got some documents that I'll share as well. But Erica, did you want to comment at all on some of that? I touched on it at a high level, but you probably have a little bit more granularity or some more experience behind it.
Well, I didn't hear anything back from the school. I wrote to the trustee. I heard back from the principal, and all he said was that he would get back in touch with me after he heard from his legal department. But I was the only parent, according to him, in all of Toronto, which is fucking 4 million people, who sent anything like this. So far they haven't really taken me that seriously. I might hit them with the affidavit. Mm-hmm. It's really frustrating. I asked them some other questions just when I was just emailing them. I asked them what kind of insurance they have. That had their attention too. What kind of liability insurance do you have? Yep. What kind of reporting mechanisms do you have for adverse reactions to the kids? What kind of medical training do your teachers have? Which doctor prescribed this medical treatment to my kids? Can I talk to the doctor? But like I said, it's, they're not respecting it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, at this point, I might be moving on to the affidavit. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're still meeting, there's still been some meetings with Stand for Thee. There was one involving some judges, which was really interesting. And there's a group of lawyers, I think it's called, I wrote it down. IIAC, which was a group of lawyers, internationally, that are starting to fight some of this stuff.
Yeah. And I think, you're hitting on a key point here, which is, and you saw, even in my comments, and I didn't even know that, whether you'd file the affidavit or not, but, that cease and desist letter, to me, that's a great, take notice, right? Yeah. I'm putting you on notice. Yeah. I'm doing it in a respectful way. And the letter is also something that serves as a grounding for when if you do follow through with an affidavit, to say, hey, listen, I sent you this letter. I received no response. You even mentioned the letter within 72 hours, right? So, I've waited 10 days or whatever it might be. I still have no response. You can state those things in your affidavit. So,
they did reply, but they just said they have to talk to the legal department and then they'll be back in touch. And that was last week.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, they can take as long as they want, right? They say, hey, we'll talk to our legal department. We'll get back to you. Maybe that'll be a month, and hopefully they'll get back to you before then, but they're under no obligation to respond to you right now. It's just a conversation, right? And
yeah.
So if and when you want to push, that's where the affidavit comes in and says, okay, no more Mr. Nice Guy. We were having a conversation. You stopped talking to me. Here's my response back to your silence.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So let me actually share one more thing with you guys, because I think this will be helpful. Because I put together a few things for myself. So I redacted some of this stuff. Let me just do one thing here. Okay. So that way, some personal information is out of it. But you can do a couple things when you think about these affidavits. So what I've done and what I've included is this affidavit of status, which you can include with that cease and desist letter, when you send an affidavit, I would send an affidavit of fact, which is what we kind of looked at before, which is, you know, just bullet points like I've got here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth. But this affidavit of status, and I can share this with you guys too, really just more or less says that I am a living man. I'm a creation of God, right? I have rights that were granted to me by my creator that no other man can supersede. And these are all things that I am willing to testify in front of a court of law anywhere, right? To say to anybody. So you just say to them quite simply, and again, it's an affidavit form. So when you send this to them, they have to rebut the fact that you're a living man or a living woman and that you have rights. And they have to do it in all these different ways. So they'd have to come back for point 6, for point 7, and point 8, and point to what authority they have over a man or a woman, right? And that's part of your argument that you're having here as well, which is like, hey, I'm a living, breathing man and woman. You know, my child is also a living, breathing man or woman, or, you know, boy or girl, and they have rights. And, you know, stating this very clearly as to what your rights are and what they can really infringe upon. And you can see here, you know, I put some other things in here, like reserving all my, you know, natural God-given unalienable rights, waiving none ever. You'll see further on, I cite US codes. So this might be a little bit different for you in Canada, but you cite different codes on them as well. And then I've got space down here where I get these things notarized. And I've done a few of these affidavits of, you know, statuses and had them notarized. One I carry on me just to have, you know, in case you get in any situation or whatnot. But others, you know, just to, you know, use when you need to use them. So the affidavit of fact, which is one that I've sent here, very straightforward. I always send everything certified mail. So Erica, I don't know if you sent your cease and desist letter certified mail, but if you did.
No, I should have. I sent it by email.
Okay, well, that's fine.
We did it as a group. Yeah, so we did it all at the same time. And then we just, like, all across Canada, we sent them out.
Great, good. I mean, you could, instead of citing the certified mail, I would maybe print out that email thread that you've got, and especially if they replied back to you, then that shows that they were communicating. But at least with certified mail, I send it that way, so that way I know it's 100% verified by the US Postal Service, that they replied back. The other reason behind that is I request a reply back in writing, because once they reply back to you in writing through the US Postal Service, and again, there might be some differences between Canada, but probably not too many, that's now mail fraud that they're committing when they further respond to you. If they're breaking the law and then they claim that they're not breaking the law and they're trying to mislead you and commit fraud, they've now tacked on mail fraud on top of the other things that they're fraudulently doing. So that's another reason why I always do it through the mail as well, is because now they're breaking additional laws. And so inside this affidavit, you can see again, I just state it very plainly, very simply. I won't run through all these different sentences, but I just say, hey, like number 5, the person is doing business as the City and Village Tax Office sent a letter postmarked February 8th, 2021, which failed to address my letter. So I had sent them an initial letter, the certified mail, requesting my right to receive verification of a debt, copy enclosed. Just keep it very simple, very matter of fact. And then, you know, later on in here, you'll see where I start to talk about bar grievances, cite the Missouri Constitution for due process of law, all those types of things. And then I demand down here, number 24, that they respond in written affidavit form within 10 days from the receipt of this affidavit. So I'm laying out exactly how I want them to respond and the different claims that are being put forward on them, right? So that's how you put forward an affidavit.
And who did you send this to? To the city?
No, so you want to send this to specific people. I blacked out most people's names on here because there's some private individuals that are acting in a fictional manner. But like this code enforcement inspector at the bottom, you know, John Doe, I sent it specifically to each of these individuals at their specific address. There's 3 individuals here that are blacked out that the City and Village Tax Office is representing. So I'm not going to send it to their home addresses, but I will send it to their attorney in the care of their names, right? So their attorney will notify them because I don't have their home addresses. But you want to send it specifically to the man or woman that you are addressing, not to any public official, right? So even in my language, I talk about here as the persons doing business as. So you want to address them as the persons doing business as. This is all based off of direct communication between one man to another man one woman to another woman, whatever it might be. And this is how you, again, keep it in the land of the real, not the land of the fictional, and talk about how these fictional entities are breaking the law. And the crux here is that no one will ever take the stand in any court on behalf of any fictional entity because it's against the law. And, you know, we probably won't get into that today because it's a little bit more of a deeper conversation, but no fictional entity has authority over any living man or woman, nowhere. So you push back on the men and the women individually, and no one is ever going to, you know, testify in court as the superintendent of so-and-so has the authority to do this to your man, woman, child. They don't, and they won't. No official will ever take the stand. No city of blank, blank, blank will ever take the stand. No state of will ever take the stand. Who is the state? Who is the city? There's a man or a woman who is acting as a fictional entity. So you need to sue, not necessarily sue, but you need to file affidavits against that man or that woman to put them on notice. And then to take it a step further, I'll show you here. You send them a notice of claim, and you could do this after you send an affidavit. You could send it with your affidavit and you put them on claim. So the respondents here, again, they're all blacked out, and I'm making a claim of $10,000 against each and every one of them for breaking the law.
Good for you.
Yep, for being non-compliant, and you can read it right here.
Yeah.
For being non-compliant with the constitutions and laws that bind you, for being non-compliant in the limited powers that were delegated to you, and for the damages that your role and actions in this matter have caused me and my estate, right? And that's essentially how you want to word it. And I'll send all this stuff out to you, but, you know, again, you're really just trying to put them on notice, and I'll stop my share here. Put them on notice and make a personal claim against them. And if there's attorneys that are involved, you can file bar grievances against those attorneys as well. If an attorney gets 3 bar grievances against them in 1 year, they lose their license. Their insurance will go away and they will lose their license to practice as an attorney. So there are ways that you can push back on these people that they do not want, and will make them stand up and say, oh, man, that cease and desist letter that we pushed off, we messed with the wrong person, right? Because this person knows the law. They know how to push back in a way that they're going to make, you know, me attorney or superintendent or whoever feel uncomfortable. And the fact of the matter is, I don't know if it's your superintendent, I keep saying that, but you know, your superintendent of schools or whatever it might be, they have no idea how to respond to what you said to them. No idea. They're just like, I don't know what this letter is. Like, can you help me? And they'll talk to their attorney and they're like, I don't know what this person is saying. Like, am I breaking the law? Like, what's happening here? They're freaking out. They have no clue, right? They're just a button pusher. So you think that person's going to get on the stand someday and say like, yep, I've got the authority to make sure that your kid's got to wear a mask under this, and this law. No, they're just going to follow the guidance of their attorneys. And their attorneys are just going to try and fall back on this code, this statute, this whatever. No code, no statute, no law gives anyone the authority to infringe upon your rights. They just don't. And you're never going to get somebody who's going to say they do in a court of law. So if you push in the right way and you push hard enough, there's nothing they can do. There's absolutely
and they're breaking so many laws. So many, especially labor laws, like tons of labor laws.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I put together a document for myself that I've shared with a few people who want to push about all the different laws that are being broken, U.S. code, Missouri code of laws as well. And there's easily half a dozen that are felonies that people are breaking. So that's where now it becomes, how hard do you want to push and how far do you want to take it, right? Do you want to let people know that you're displeased? That's one way to go about it. Maybe that'll make some change. In my experience, it really hasn't made anyone really want to change, especially when they've got public opinion, the CDC, the WHO, all saying wear a mask, wear a mask, wear a mask, right? So the next layer is, okay, I've been respectful. I've put you on notice. I've let you know that here's my displeasure and here's the laws that you're breaking. Now I'm going to file an affidavit and claims against you that file damages, which means you have to respond to these things. Otherwise, I mean, I could put a lien on your house, right? To say, hey, you owe me $10,000. Or, I mean, frankly, in your case, I would file for a much larger claim than 10,000. That's a minor issue that I'm working on that I showed you right there.
Mhm.
But in your case, what's the value of the life of your child and the health of your child?
Yeah.
So that's a claim that I would make, at least for the cost of my home. And if it was my child, it'd be millions of dollars, right? I might file a claim for like $50 million or something like that and be like, hey, listen, if you want to do these things, and in your conditional acceptance there, you know, part of the conditional acceptance could be is as long as you're going to accept liability for any harm that may be caused to my child, then I'm willing to comply if you can, you know, change the masks every so often, make sure they fit correctly, follow these laws. And if you accept full liability that if you harm my child, I will sue you personally. And they're never going to say yes to that, which means when you file your claims and they don't rebut them, you can go after them for $10 million if you want, right? In a court of law. And they have no recourse against you other than to go to trial and hopefully a trial by jury. And I mean, maybe they'll get, you know, a bunch of jury members that say, yeah, well, we can enforce this anyway. And your rights mean, you know, your rights mean nothing and my rights mean nothing. Maybe that's certainly one outcome, but more often what's happened and happened in the past through other types of situations is these people relent because they're not standing on any legal footing whatsoever. They're just applying pressure through like corporate policy, more or less.
Yeah. And the unions aren't helping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, your union is supposed to be, you know, one that uses the law to protect your rights. And, you know, what have they said as far as, you know, different laws that are being broken? Do they just kind of murmur some nonsense and then change the conversation? I mean,
yeah, they say, well, it's public health. They say we can't go against public health.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. They forcibly tested hundreds of people at the plant, like forcibly stuck things up their noses and then sent the whole shift home for 2 weeks. That's crazy. And everybody went along with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They consented, right? So,
they consented. Yeah.
You know, it was presented in a way that it seemed quite mandatory, right? All the language seemed quite mandatory.
Yeah.
And they consented to be physically violated.
And it is a violation.
Yep. That's a battery. I mean, that's battery is really what it's assault.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And people are consenting to it because, you know, we're good people at heart. We want to believe the best. We don't want to hurt anybody else's health, right? Nobody wants to get anybody sick or nothing like that. So everybody does it in the name of public health or whatever it might be, right? Mm-hmm. It's really a shame, but that's how people are being manipulated, is using their goodness. People are being manipulated.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't want to sit here and grandstand too much, but I figured I'd run through some of those documents, talk about them a little bit. If, you know, other people that are on here, if you want to chime in, have any questions, conversations on it, or maybe situations that you're dealing with, you know, I'll say this and then I'll open the floor. And I talked about it at the beginning. This process of, you know, you can write a letter at first to talk about something that's happening in your life. Maybe it's to your employer who's trying to get you to wear a mask or take a vaccine. Write a letter, let them know that, you know, you feel that's a violation of your rights and you're not going to do that, and state why, and maybe ask for them to, you know, make some conditional acceptance. Maybe in that letter is even a good thing to do, to try and find some common ground. They're probably not going to come to common ground. And then I would certainly pursue the route of, if you want to push hard enough and if it means enough to you, file those affidavits, right? I would file an affidavit and put those people on notice. And if you want to keep pushing and they don't do anything, file a notice of claim on them and put a damage amount of some monetary figure that is meaningful and you know, relatively reasonable, or whatever you want to call it, based off the matter, right? If you're dealing with a small matter, like I put a $10,000 claim in mine, maybe that's appropriate. In Erica's case, for the, you know, health and welfare and psychological well-being of your child, man, I don't care what number you put on there. If I'm on that jury, I'm like, yeah, she's 50 million. Okay, let's talk about it. Yeah, whatever the number is, right? If it's your employer and it's your livelihood, you're like, okay, what's my salary times maybe I lose my job and I'm out of work for 5 years. Okay, maybe that's the amount that I claim. But think about that as to how you're going to press back on these people, because it's probably going to have to go through some type of affidavit to get their attention.
Yeah, like I even got in touch with the Ministry of Labor, the Ministry of Labor Ontario and in Canada, emailed all of them, wanting to know like how can we all be prescribed the same thing, like despite health, despite fitness levels, despite age, like and in an indefinite amount of time too, like despite profession, like I mean, some people have a desk job, some people are like letter carriers, driving vehicles. Like, how can we all have the same treatment? And the ministry told me if we came in there, we would go with what public health says. That's what he told me.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it comes down to, everyone is just sort of doing a job, right? They're just like, hey,
orders.
Yeah, right. They're like, hey, I'm just like, who am I? What can I do? I can't push back on public health policy, right? It's public health. Like, how can I push back on that? They don't even know how to do this, even if they wanted to. If they wanted to push, they don't even know how to do this, right? If they were listening to this conversation right now, they'd be mind blown that you can do something like this and file affidavits and put pressure on people. And if, they probably wouldn't even want to do it, because then they might think, well, hey, is my job going to be in jeopardy because of that or something, right? Now, to address that real quick, if you do file affidavits with these people, whether it be your employer or whoever, if they later fire you, you can use the fact that you got fired after filing these affidavits as like wrongful terminations and stuff as well. So now you're talking about a whole nother, legal avenue that you can pursue for more damages too. So like, we don't even have to be afraid of ramifications for standing up for ourselves. It's incredibly difficult because, 9 out of 10 people in the world around you want to call you crazy for doing it, and want to call you selfish and all this other stuff. But you're not. I mean, you're just standing up for what you believe in.
And it's not going to stop. Like this isn't about the masks. This is about the vaccine. Like they're not going to stop.
Right.
So I mean, fight now or fight in 6 months over the vaccine, because either way, like they want inside our bodies.
Yeah, for sure. Well, cool. Anybody else have some thoughts on the matter?
I guess to me, more than mask or vaccine, it's the space in here in our kids' heads that more so bothers me. And reclaiming that, as far as affidavits go and stuff like that, I think that seems to be a good avenue to try and break through to these people. Like, look, here. I mean, I wonder if maybe tearing on their heartstrings about what they're doing to their kids and the world that they're building for their kids, and the shame that maybe they should feel for what they're doing for their ancestors past and gone, in the world that they're making today, right now, that they're participating in, because they can't give up their attachment to whatever without burning their retinas out,
Yeah. And I think that's it's like you make a plea to the person, like you said, to their heartstrings of like, how can you do this to your kids? The crazy part to me though is, like, I think about like my own sister and my brother-in-law, like they don't think anything that they're doing is wrong. They're putting masks on their kids. My sister's gotten her vaccine. I think my brother-in-law probably will. I don't know if they'll vaccinate their kids, but they're in their mind, this is the tough part, and where I empathize with where they're coming from for a lot of people, which is, again, they're playing on our goodness, our kindness, is they're doing this because they want to protect their kids, and they think they're protecting their kids and their family. And man, Yeah, it's tough. Like how do you appeal to somebody who's going to be like, I am doing the best thing for my kids, right? So that's a hard conversation, but yeah, that's where I always want to start. That's where I've started, and that's where I've been for a year. Oh my gosh, I've been doing that for a year, right? I think we probably all have.
Well, I think, I guess I posted something about it on the thing. I'm kind of new around these parts and whatnot, but I was thinking, I was watching video the other day, and I thought, like in the Congress and say the House of Representatives and stuff, they get plopped a $15,000 or a 15,000 page bill on their desk in front of them and are expected to vote on it in 12 hours or whatever, and that there is so much truth out there. And I suppose I need to stop thinking and get into more of an active form, but there's so much truth out there that why would it be effective to put down like a 2,300 page kind of thing that says, that this is my testament of faith and this is my understanding of my position and where I am, like your affidavit of status or whatever, notice of status or whatever, and this is what you participate in, this is that association, what that entity does, while it may not stand for it on its face, but that's what it is. And it's bad news bears, like, because just look at it. And of course, yeah, I think you got to have the actual face-to-face conversation close to the person, so that the message can be, there's more of a chance for it to be felt, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah I mean, do you think any of those people in office actually read any of those bills?
Well, exactly. But and that's, so maybe something in the middle, maybe a happy medium of something that we could expect the reader to fulfill, but it's got to be meaty. You got to have some meat on there that strikes them. Maybe a building 7 type scenario for people where they can look at that and say, that's fucking weird.
Yeah.
That doesn't fit. But I don't. It's a hard time to be raising a child and telling them what's right and what's appropriate and what's not.
Yep. Yeah. And I feel where you're coming from when you talk about, wanting to protect and care for, what's up here in your child's mind, right? I mean, that's the most important thing. Yeah, that's a hard struggle and a hard battle, especially, if they're going into public schools and, the stuff they're learning there and what they're being taught. And if they're talking about putting a mask on their face and all this stuff, hell yeah, I'm worried about what's going on inside my kid's head, and how that impact is going to have on them. So
I have a friend who's a teacher, and she says that she hates it. Like, she hates wearing the mask. She can't even walk up and down the stairs. She hates putting them on the kids. But they don't have an out. And so some of this stuff, hitting them with some of this legal stuff, then it kind of even gives them an out, a way that they can say no, because right now they can't. Everybody's up under so much pressure.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. My mom's a teacher as well. And I don't want to speak for her, but let's just say that I'm pretty sure that she has no desire to put a mask on, no desire to get vaccinated, no desire to require any of her students to wear a mask, and would prefer to be full-time in person. I don't want to make any claims for her, but I feel pretty confident about that. Mm-hmm. And she doesn't feel like there's anything that she can do, right? Because what is she gonna, just one person stand up in the midst of her school? She's gonna get fired. Are you kidding me? So you're right, Erica. People need to win these battles and show through action in their own communities, oh, there is another way. And as these things move forward and as there are victories, I think that's how, if any tide is going to turn, that's how it's going to turn, right? I mean, I even take like a state like North Dakota, where they don't have any mask mandates. People kind of operate pretty freely. And how important is it to be surrounded by people in a community that understands and respects like people's rights? Mm-hmm. And if there were more communities that were like that, there'd be more places that were open, right? Florida, many places down there are relatively open. How important is it to have an impact in your community? So like that whole idea of like, think globally, act locally. God, that's super important, right? Like we need to act in our local communities and force our local communities to respect rights, which is insane that we even need to have this conversation to say our governments should be respecting our rights. Like, where are we as a populace across the world that we're even like, we have to push for this. I thought like we achieved freedom, you know, thousands of years ago, right? And it's like, come on, it's crazy.
It is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll give anybody else who wants the last word on this. Anything else that you guys had or thoughts on the matter, whether it be the mask, the affidavits, things of that nature. But yeah.
Can you put the information that you put together up somewhere so I can see it?
Yep. Yeah. I'll post that up on the, you're on Dojo Earth, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. I'll post that up on the Dojo Earth. I've got a thread open for how to unmask your school. So inside there, I've got some documents. I'll post those documents that I shared with the affidavits. It'll have my redacted information on it, but you can take it, copy, paste it, rewrite it, whatever it might be. And then I'll also share a couple other places that are good hubs of information. So I don't know if any of you have heard of a fellow by the name of Alphonse Fagiolo, but he was on the Crow 777 radio show, and he's been on there a number of times talking about, and this is where a lot of what I've learned has been through him and through other people in the past as well that have used this method to push back on government entities, not necessarily just about the mask, but I mean, illegal taxation and all kinds of other things that are a little bit outside the bounds of what we're talking about today. But there's like a Telegram group that I'll include where you can go and bounce ideas off of people. People share documents, they comment on each other and say like, I might word it a little bit differently here, or I think you're making a claim that you can't back up here. So you can get some good real-time feedback. I'll include all of that, like the places to get information. So any of you guys want them, beyond just me, there are a community of hundreds, and I guarantee you thousands and probably tens of thousands and maybe hundreds of thousands of people that if they knew about these resources would be doing something. So the more we can share this amongst each other like-minded individuals, the more powerful we're all going to become. Yeah. So, all right, guys. Well, cool. Thanks for tuning in for a little bit. Yeah.
I got a question, Josh.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Josh?
Yeah, go ahead, Johnny.
You've heard of Tom Barnett, right?
Oh, yeah.
The Australian guy? Okay.
Yeah.
I was watching one of his recent streams, and he was saying because of COVID, you can get stuff notarized by yourself with just your friends. You don't need to get Notary Republic to do that. Is that the case that you found?
Yes. So there's two things you can do if you don't want to go to a Notary Public. There are now places that advertise online to do your notarizations via just sending in documents. You might need to like send in your driver's license or something like that, but they'll just notarize it like through the internet. I would prefer to do it through just like my neighbors or friends. And so you can actually get a document notarized as long as you've got 3 witnesses. You actually legally only need 2 witnesses. And as long as you have 2 witnesses that'll sign and say like, yep, I saw Johnny put this document together. I'm not saying it's true or false or anything. I just am saying that I witnessed him put this document together and that Johnny is the person who is making these statements. That's all that they're doing. That's all that they're doing. They're not saying that anything is true or false or indifferent. They're just saying, yep, I will go in court and say that I saw Johnny put this together. These are his statements, period, end of story. So you can get 2 people to do that. That's notarized. You do not need an official notary at all. So good point.
Yeah, I was thinking of trying the cease and desist just to, it's a smaller school board where I'm at. It's not Toronto, it's further north. I did speak with the principal. I did tell him our kids are gonna stay enrolled in the online because of the mask. And he immediately countered that, well, if they're exempt, they don't have to wear it. And that just the peer pressure involved in getting a teenager to be pretty much the only one without a mask. That's the issue I'm kind of running into, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to tackle that battle, you know?
Yeah, that's a much tougher one, because now you're talking about, even if they're willing to grant an exemption, for example, for your child, how is your child going to feel when they're in school and they're the only one not wearing a mask? Now they're probably going to want to put on the mask just to not be ostracized, right? Not be picked on for whatever reason, because that's what kids do, right? Is they pick on things that are different from them. And that's a that's a harder spiritual battle, right? Because that's not one that you can necessarily go and what are you going to do? Issue an affidavit on your kid? You know, you can't force him, so or her. So if they want to do it, that's a tough one, especially if your school is willing to give your child an exemption, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really powerful of your school, actually, to say like, yeah, like we'll happily give your kid an exemption if he's not comfortable doing it. Like, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't know how to go after that school, because frankly, you don't have any grounds to go after them at that point. Right. And I said this before, and I'll say it again. Anytime you're going to think about using an affidavit, you need to keep it to firsthand experience. Right. So I'm not going to go after Dr. Fauci with an affidavit. How has Dr. Fauci wronged me as a man? Well, there's these policies that have been put out, yada, yada, whatever. But Dr. Fauci is going to say, well, hey, I never told Josh to go do any of these things, right? So he hasn't wronged me personally. So I always keep, that in the back of my mind. You can only go after what's right in front of your face, just firsthand experience. If they're giving you the exemption for your kid, that's great. That's also like super nefarious in a way, because you're right. It's like, how does my kid feel about fighting that battle? That's hard.
Yeah, I don't think they would want to be the only ones in the school without it. So I don't know. It's a tough one.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know people that actually, I know a friend's wife who is actually allergic to the material in the surgical masks. She has a skin condition. She breaks out from wearing the mask. She works in a hospital, and her doctor basically told her to wear a cotton one underneath it so she's not exposed to it, and then to wear the other one on top. So their suggestion is to double mask.
Right.
So it's just ridiculous. And I claim the exemption card, and people that are really exempt are pressured into wearing it. That's what's so evil about what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and really, we're all exempt if we want to be, right? I mean, this is the thing, like, whether it's a religious belief or, spiritual belief, even the idea of a religious belief, right? Like, I think it very, very much is religious for me, right? It violates how I feel. And Erica, you mentioned before, like, your God-given right to breathe.
Right.
And you don't need to say, if somebody's like, well, what religion is that? It's like, it doesn't matter what religion it is. It's like, this is my religious beliefs. It doesn't need to be, Catholic or Jewish or whatever. That doesn't matter. We all have a right to these things. It's,
I told the principal that I now consider the school to be the most dangerous place for my child. And not because of some virus, but because you're literally suffocating my child. And I told my boss the same thing. Like now work is the most dangerous place for me because you're taking away my God-given right to breathe. And he sent me home. I got sent home.
Yeah. And I mean, think about what you're saying and what Johnny's saying about, you know, his child as well, as like the psychological pressure as well, you know? So now you're walking around, and even if you're the only one who's exempt at work, God, like you feel all of the psychological pressure from everybody constantly, 24/7. So yeah, you're damn right. It is a dangerous place. You're like, this is dangerous to my psyche. It's dangerous to my kid's psyche. Like, this is not healthy. Even the fact that like we have to stand up and fight these things. God, it takes a lot of energy, a lot of effort, a lot of calories, a lot of building up emotionally to do these things. You know, to get to the place where we're at, and even pushing this stuff. Like, this isn't easy. This isn't something that's come easy to anybody who wants to push. So yeah, I don't wish it on anybody.
I have an interesting aside. I don't know if it could go down this way if a lot of parents fight back, but I am from a smaller town, and there is actually one store, a Canadian Tire near us, that there's a sign on the door that says, some of our employees are exempt. Please give them 6 feet distance and respect their exemption, which I should take a picture of that. This is the first time I've ever seen. Unfortunately, there's about 3 of them that are exempt, but they're forced to wear a clear, almost like a drool mask.
The face shield. Yeah.
It's not even a face. One of them has a face shield. The other 2, it's almost like a drool mask, a clear drool mask just over the chin. And like, to me, I'm not even okay with that. Like, I don't know. Like Costco, I had my own Costco experience when I've heard about yours in the dojo. But in Canada, I don't know how it is in the States, but in Canada, Costco is the first one who said 0 exemptions for masks. But if you have a medical condition, you have to wear a face shield. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't okay with that. So I asked for my money back, and I quit being a member. So that's the route I took. But I don't know, like, do they have legal right to make someone wear a face shield? I guess that's the next question.
Right. Nope. So I didn't get into it today, but I'll include it in some of the follow-up information that I post. Anytime that you're putting either a mask or a face shield or a clear drool bucket or whatever, those are considered now medical devices because they are for the purpose of preventing a disease, a virus. So the whole reason that they're telling you to put that on your face is to prevent a virus. That's their claim that they're making. Because they make that claim that face shield is now protecting you from a virus, that face shield has become a medical device, which is now a regulated thing. And as far as I know, no one at Costco that I've encountered is my physician or is registered as a physician either. So they're actually practicing medicine without a license, which is a felony. So there's a lot of things that you can get into. Now the question is, do you want to then go and push Costco, or do you just want to take your business elsewhere? I find for me, I've had my own experience, and I'm not sure if I'll file an affidavit with those guys because I've got other things that I need to care about in my life other than Costco. It's like I can shop elsewhere. I can figure it out. I can just take my business elsewhere. Now, for like a school or for like taxing authorities or things like that are doing other stuff illegally, those are bigger fish to fry, and those are things that I'm willing to push back on. But yeah, you could push back on Costco. You could.
What do you think about trying to hit public health? Like, could you hit public health with an affidavit? Because like that's kind of the head of the Hydra. Like, who's ever like issuing these orders?
Who is public health?
Well, the lady around here, her name's Eileen DeVille. She's our public health minister.
Well, I think it's kind of like I said before, I can't hit Dr. Fauci with an affidavit.
Right, right.
You know, it's got to be somebody who is imposing a policy on you. Yeah. So Dr. Fauci has issued guidelines, which they'll even tell you from like the CDC or whatever, like they're not laws, they're guidelines. Now, all these corporations are choosing to follow the guidelines, and their corporate policy is now, hey, you got to wear a mask because the CDC says so. But really the CDC or Dr. Fauci would say, that's just a guideline. You don't have to follow it at all. So I don't think that there's any personal harm that Eileen has done you or that Dr. Fauci has done me. Now, we can have the conversation. I can make the logical claim, and I think you and I would both agree, like, yes, this stems from them. Of course it does. But in a legal sense, no, I don't think there's anything you can do unless Eileen is also your school superintendent and, said, hey, you've got to wear a mask. There's got to be some physical wrong done. Otherwise, you don't have a claim.
Right.
Now, in Johnny's case for Costco, the manager of Costco or whoever, the employee, was trying to mandate to enter the store, he needed to wear a face shield. Now, that's a physical action. That's a physical wrongdoing. He was barred from entry from a public accommodation. That's breaking the law. So that person broke the law. In my case at Costco, I had 3 individuals that were managers that tried to break the law. If I was going to issue an affidavit, and I do have one written up that I haven't sent to them, I list them by name, and I would send each of them their own copy of the affidavit and a claim against each individual man. Now, how would that roll up to the corporate policy? I don't know. And this is one of the reasons that I kind of stopped there, because it's like, my guess is maybe I'd get that store manager fired and they'd probably just replace him with somebody else because he's just a button pusher, right? So what would Costco do? They'd probably just fire the guy if push came to shove. That's my guess. Maybe that store would close down. I don't know. I don't care enough about it right now to do anything.
It's almost like we have to take the fight right
I also
to the
had
devil himself, like right to Satan himself, because that's where it's coming from.
If you
right from the top.
Yeah, if you can get a citation from an officer for not wearing a mask, then you can go after more of the public officials because now they've done you a physical wrong. So if you can get a citation from a peace officer or a public officer for not wearing a mask at Costco or something like that, and if you want to go through that experience, more power to you. Because once you've got that citation, now you have a legal standing to bring a claim against that person. That's how you do it. You need some physical wrongdoing against you. Just somebody coming out with a policy is not good enough. It sucks, I know, but that's how the law works.
Yeah, it's enforcement through peer pressure. That's the key. I also had 3 managers pounce on me when I went in just to get my money back. Mm-hmm. But the one screaming the loudest was the boomer with the mask that was also at the customer service line, who decided to get involved and tell me that I should be wearing a mask. But all the people that they make examples of, they're the ones who show their red belt, get angry. And I don't care. I just take my business elsewhere. With kids though, with schools, I'd be okay if they were homeschooled, but they want the credentials, they want the experience of graduating, and I'm trying my best to give it to them, but it's going to be a tough September. Yeah,
I feel that. And in some ways, like in your particular situation, maybe they make it through just fine and they suffer some of the peer pressures of these things and they have to deal with some of what they have to deal with. Sometimes life doesn't go the direction we want it to, I guess. But
I was thinking of trying the cease and desist method, mm-hmm. and serve them that I'll hold them liable if there's harm. And I will let them choose. They are sovereign beings. And if they choose to wear a mask and they do get ill from having it 6 hours a day, then I have documentation that I've warned them. And I don't know if they can say, well, they chose to do it, but I don't know how I can do that. But they should be liable. So I like the method of finding out what their liability insurance is.
Right. And the other thing, Johnny, is that your kids are below the age of majority. So in the eyes of the law, they're not really capable of making that decision on their own. So you could argue that they succumbed to peer pressure because the school wasn't forcing every other kid to wear a mask. So even though maybe your school said to your child, well, if you don't want to, you don't have to, that's very difficult for a child to make those decisions. And again, they're under the age of majority. So they were more or less coerced into wearing a mask. So there's probably ways you can go after that. How successfully, I don't quite know. But yeah, I would encourage you to at least put the pressure on your school, right? And maybe lay some groundwork and see where it takes you. Because there's not really a lot of downside to it, other than maybe it takes you a bit of your time, right? To put some of these things together, and maybe you ruffle some people the wrong way that don't ever look at you the same. But are you ever going to look at those people the same again either? I don't know. Up to you.
All right, I'll probably head now. My phone's gonna die, but thanks for the meeting. It's been very.
Yeah, we're running anyway. Thanks guys for attending. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Josh.
And yeah, I'll see you guys all up in the dojo. Okay.
All right. Peace out, man. Thanks.
See ya.